This video contains an ad for War Thunder, more on that later on in the video. The Nightshade is the leader of an underground organization in the Land of Shadow, known as the Bottomless Black from which no light can escape, or more commonly abbreviated as the BB. This powerful fighter mixes magical and martial arts to assassinate all of his targets quickly. Speed is everything in the world of the Nightshade. The organization's code for assassins is that a kill has to be clean and precise, and preferably not leave a single trace behind. For the Nightshade, all of that comes natural, as one that has mastered its craft is the most dangerous. It's been measured too, by the way. The Nightshade moves faster than the speed of lightning, going from one target to another if necessary. Useful for group-based assassinations. Hence why the few people in history that were sharp enough and maybe unfortunate enough to observe the Nightshade in action only saw a shade at most. What type of build is the Nightshade? Well, describing his characteristics, you might have already guessed. This is a dexterity build that also utilizes magic and dexterity-based lightning. We use dexterity's rare property where it can in fact scale magic damage in addition to its more common physical damage scaling with this build, to make an all-round monster that has absolutely insane DPS. Now in this video, you'll see how the Nightshade defeats every single boss with ease. But to properly understand how my build here works, we have to go step by step. See, the DLC introduced a new Ash of War, known as Blink Bolt. Initially, you might think that this Ash of War is just a relatively low damage ability, but it's more than that. See, Blink Bolt is a fantastic gap closing ability and in the process can dodge enemy attacks while doing so too. But what it can do too is proc the tiers of the consecutive attack based buff talismans like the Millicent's Prosthesis, the Winged Sword Insignia talismans and the Thorny Crack tier Crystal tier pretty much every time you hit your enemy with it, as indicated by the red glow surrounding you. It then also scales the best with dexterity since it's a lightning based Ash of War. Now I'm not talking about the game's Dragon Cult version of lightning, but the dexterity-based lightning of the game. So I wouldn't use this Ash of War for its damage here, but rather for its ability to generate damage buffs quickly, but while doing so, getting to your target and setting up for your next attacks while dodging simultaneously. Then we use the Claws of Night here as our primarily damage-dealing weapon, which is one of the strongest weapons introduced with the DLC, to do absolutely disgusting damage in melee range. But important to note here is that these claws scale with dexterity entirely, so we already have a great synergistic aspect on multiple fronts here between our claws and our gap closing Ash of War. But while claws reign supreme in close quarter combat, they lack two things: poise damage and range. Now of course you can argue it doesn't really matter when you have this type of damage output, but it does, as DPS must be high at all times as a bursty assassin. We can have no downtime whatsoever. Our enemy goes aerial, we won't be able to really reach it. Our enemy spams attacks and interrupts us just a tad too much. Stance breaking gives us great momentum, so we can use the claws magic property here to really finalize the build, because dexterity does in fact scale the magic aspect of the claws too. Hence why I want to ask you one question: is there a magic based Ash of War in the game that scales extremely well with dexterity without having to rely on intelligence, that gives us both poise damage and reach beyond the range of our Claws of Night's Ash of War, while also making our damage output even more crazy? Did you think of something? Type it out in the comments. And ding ding ding, it's Ice Spear. Ice Spear gives us everything we need and scales primarily with dexterity, even though it's a magic based Ash of War. Now I've covered Ice Spear before in previous videos of mine. It is one of the strongest Ashes of Wars from the base game, and it gives us that reach while dealing great damage, that stance breaking capability, and it procs Frostbite on top of all that too, snowballing our damage even more out of control with the Claws of Night, since Frostbite gives you, in addition to the burst, that debuff that increases your damage output with 20% against the frostbitten target. So basically the build is getting a lot stronger. But wait, can't we only add Ice Spear on heavyweight spears and halberds as indicated by its name, and won't we have too much weapons? No. See, the DLC introduced a S-tier dexterity scaling spear, known as the Swift Spear, and we can put Ice Spear on this thing for a very deadly combo. The Swift Spear is a very underrated weapon that pretty much no one has talked about, but it has a very fast moveset as a bonus, but more importantly, the spear scales precisely in the fashion that would optimize our build for Claws of Night and pumps the damage output of Ice Spear at at the same time. The Swift Spear only weighs 3 of whatever the game uses as its metric to determine weight, and thus is extremely lightweight, especially for a spear. And we put Blink Bolt on another pair of claws to stay thematically on point, also known as the Raptor Talons, which scale very well with dexterity 2 and only weigh 1.5. Now our weight management here is very important, as we are using 3 different weapons with powerful Ashes of Wars without even exceeding 7.5 weight. And this then in turn allows us to wear quite some heavy armor in a capped setup, as you probably already saw, that will give us insane sustain, which is very useful for a build like this. Let's get into the setup, but before we do so, make sure to subscribe to me if you haven't yet, like the video, you know how it works, and check out my Patreon if you like my work and want to support the channel. And I also have written versions of my build guides there too, so it is a win-win situation really. So setup wise, we run the Millicent's Prosthesis for one of our talisman slots, as well as the very similar Thorny Crack Tier in our flask, since we attack really quickly with our claws. In fact, it is one of the highest DPS weapon classes in the game, so we get the maximum attack bonus buff from these two really fast. And then I prefer the Millicent's Prosthesis in this setup over the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, just for those juicy 5 dexterity points. For the other 3 talismans, I like the Shard of Alexander to make our insane Ashes of Wars even stronger, the Lord of Blood Exaltation talisman, as we will proc blood loss very fast yet again with this setup. So it is a quick 20% damage buff essentially. That is obviously very nice to have, I don't have to tell you that. And then the Dragon Crest Great Shield talisman for the sustain, so we can also effectively trade while going on a Wolverine rampage. If you want to go pure offensive here, glass cannon style basically, you can then swap out this talisman for the Rotten or normal Winged Sword Insignia here in addition, or the Smithing talisman from the DLC, which does in fact work on our Claws of Night Scattershot throw, as it is a weapon throwing attack. For the other crystal tier in our flask, I picked the Magic Shrouding Crack tier here, as our claws have magic damage in them in fact, and here is where the different aspects of the build also start gluing together, as Ice Spear is in fact magic damage too, so it gets buffed here as well, but it also works the other way around. See, Claws of Night can let us proc Lords of Blood's Exaltation and the final tier of both the Millicent's Prosthesis and the Thorny Crack tier rather very fast, thanks to its high DPS, of which the damage buff doesn't just apply to the Claws of Night. No, we can use our Swift Spear with Ice Spear here then and deal absolutely ridiculous damage with Ice Spear. It is a great example of how different components of the Nightshade's kit can in fact become very synergistic. Now today's sponsor, War Thunder, is the most comprehensive vehicle, high quality combat game ever made. There is simply no game better suited for fans of military history, and it's available now for free on PC and consoles. You have over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters and ships of 10 major nations, ranging from biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. And every vehicle is intricately modeled down to its individual components like engines, fuel tanks, weapons, and all of that susceptible to damage or disabling from enemy fire, and different types of armor, shells and missiles behave like their real-world counterparts, and all that makes sure you get fully immersed in the combat of War Thunder, with also very realistic graphics and authentic sound effects to make your experience even better. Do you like PvP, by the way? Well, there's a worldwide community of over 70 million players for epic PvP battles too. And what I personally like the most is the X-ray view, in which you'll see precisely where the shell penetrated, which components were affected, and what ultimately led to the destruction of your vehicle. It sets up for great strategic play. So, play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation or Xbox now by using my link in the pinned comment or video description. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator, Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's available for a limited time only, so be quick. And here's an example with the Godskin Duo, where I've made these guys my test dummies essentially. Yes, in my free time I do all kinds of questionable experiments. Now this is Ice Spear without any of the buffs applied. And then here, let me just quickly apply all those buffs on the Godskin, like the Thorny Crack tier, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. And after doing so, as indicated by the red effects that surround your character, throw the Ice Spear at the other Godskin, with it being super buffed essentially, and it also being able to apply Frostbite, spiraling your damage even more out of control, of course. As you see, we increased Ice Spear's damage with over 1000 damage, approximately 60%, just by proccing the different gear pieces in our setup while playing the build naturally. For our armor set, we then use the Helm of Solitude, the Gauntlets of Solitude, and the Anspec's attire for our chest piece to get the aesthetic right. For the Nightshade, we have to be stunning, you know. The Nightshade is a fashion king, a real diva. The chest piece is mostly for the visuals, but the other 3 pieces grant us incredible defenses. I've pretty much tried out all the armor sets by now, and the Solitude set is in fact one of the best defensive sets added with the DLC. Our armor then also reaches that 50 poise threshold well and beyond, by the way, helping us out with resisting stance breaking hits, and with great defenses from the Solitude set, we will now even have a better time getting all our damage in without dying ourselves. It's going to make us feel invincible. Yeah, kinda, because you know how it works. Stats then, we go 75 dexterity. With our Millicent's prosthesis, it becomes 80 then, fully soft capping on it. Our Claws of Night scale with it solely, so we maximize its damage this way, and our Blink Bolt and Ice Spear also primarily scale with dexterity, which is another aspect of how these different weapons connect here and become really powerful. 60 Vigor then, of course, also fully soft capping on that for the sustain and just having as much HP as possible. 25 Faith for useful buffs like Golden Vow and Flame grant me strength to give us even more damage, sustain and stamina regeneration. 16 Mind and 25 Endurance then finally, which will give us a bunch of stamina, good FP, and also keeps us in the medium load category, even though we have a pretty tanky set on us that weighs a lot. But since we utilize lightweight weapons and are just being smart here with our stats, it all works and we still get to have our medium load rolls. Let's just start with the fights then, and I'm going to build it up first by just using the Claws of Night on the Dancing Lions so you can really see how to play around the different aspects of the build. I will just be using the Claw Scatter Shot Throw in this fight to illustrate how to properly use this Ash of War. Yeah, basically it is not rocket science, you just cast it and get the damage in. Everyone can do it, and surprisingly with its long reach you can hit the enemy at pretty much any time, even when you only get like 1 spike in. It is still building up blood loss, but of course the hits in melee range are going to be the hardest hitting ones as you get maximum contact, and as you can see the damage gets quite bonkers really fast with this Ash of War. 16k damage within seconds really, and then it's just a matter of finishing off the fight, which of course you will do so in style with this weapon. It basically just feels like you're shooting off a shotgun, and who doesn't want to shoot off a shotgun in video games, of course. Now Relana on the other hand is a bit different. I will illustrate how we can effectively trade and just go nuts with our Claws moveset here. Of course you can use the Scatter Shot Throw early on to get a quick bleed proc like I'm doing here, to set up for that juicy 20% damage right away, which after we get that, we then start slashing like there is no tomorrow, activating our Millicent's prosthesis and Thorny Cracketeer and pretty much snowballing our damage out of control real fast and also real efficiently. Really, we don't have to do a lot of stuff to get this damage. Thanks to our setup, we also trade very effectively. As you can see, we just go ham in this fight like a rabbit dog basically, and make Relana bow down on her knees, doing questionable things, but no, apologizing to us mostly for even trying to dare to touch us in this fight right before she dies. Commander Gay Ooze is then where I show off how good the DPS of the Claws is. It's just a lot of damage in quick succession basically. Stick onto your target like they have something that belongs to you. Basically just really be in their face with this build, even without Blink Bolt yet. Fights like the Commander Gay's fight, well, he kind of brings the fight to you as this guy's moveset isn't really dynamic. He basically just stomps you with his horse and tries to hit you on his horse while standing near you. So the Claws are actually an excellent option in this fight. They provide you everything you need. Blood loss, high DPS, stickiness, fast quick attack, so when he moves away again you have already hit him and chunked off several thousands of his HP, and before you know it the fight is done. Mesmer is then going to be the final boss, where we just only use the Claws just to illustrate one more scenario, and that is how quickly you can melt these type of bosses that have quite some recovery frames in their fight. And in the case of Mesmer, it's basically when he does his dives at the start of both phases and his snake attacks in phase 2. As you see, the damage again gets nuts with this setup without us taking a lot of damage, and then we even hit him for 7k in one single hit when we get the blood loss proc. And because Mesmer goes aerial quite often, which might make you think that you won't be able to hit him, it's actually not a problem at all. Thanks to the Scatter Shot Throw's reach and tracking, you can also then still pump in the damage diagonally from below like this. It's really good. In phase 2, abuse those recovery frames yet again, and with a bunch of Scatter Shot Throws, we can really melt Mesmer here down without too much trouble. Again, we have such good sustain with this build that everything he does isn't really going to be a problem for us. It's the beauty of this setup, it just has everything. And then at the end, we use our shotgun again and get that juicy 7k damage with the blood loss proc in and have another boss done. Now let's start to really incorporate the other aspects of the build, starting with the earlier mentioned Blink Bolt. As indicated here in the fight with the Putrescent Knight, you can definitely use this ability to deal with bosses. It's pretty consistent in dealing damage, and you can use it to dodge a lot of the enemy's attacks, making its sustained damage over time quite good actually. However, I still prefer to use it as the gap closing ability of our build to stick onto our targets at all times and then unleash our claws. As you see, the moment I took out my Claws of Night while in close proximity to the Putrescent Knight, well, let's say his HP bar vanished within seconds essentially. So Blink Bolt is the setup for that, and in total it is a very lethal combo. You put the Raptor Talons with Blink Bolt in your offhand and your Claws of Night and Swift Spear in your main hand. Blink Bolt to your target then swap back to your claws with triangle or Y plus R1, RB, and two-hand them, which in the case of the Claws of Night means we will in fact start dual wielding our Claws of Night for the power stance moveset and just generally more damage output. Or you can just use the Ash of War. In that case, it doesn't matter if you're dual wielding your Claws of Night or not, the damage output will be the same for the Ash of War. So there is flexibility there. But the key takeaway here is that Blink Bolt into you fully blowing your shotgun in your enemy's face is very deadly. Now the final aspect of the build, our Swift Spear with Ice Spear imbued on it, is incredible too. For example, one of the remembrance fights of the DLC is the Erdtree avatar, and it's kinda iffy if you're just going to use your claws here with how this thing's weak spot, its head, moves all over the place. But with Ice Spear we can target it very effectively and get rid of it within no time essentially. We don't even have to use our claws or Blink Bolt here, we can just target its weird looking head in all three faces and get rid of it quickly with high magic burst, reach, frostbite and pinpoint accuracy. The fight becomes an easy dub for us. But okay, I hear you, we want to see them combos. Romina, the STD giving Scorpion, is a perfect example of where we can do insane combos. Blink Bolt onto this weird ass Scorpion to be right on top of it, right on top of it, and stick onto it like what happens when you throw butter at a wall, and everyone knows the stickiness of butter, right? Or wait, am I the only person that throws butter at their walls? Anyways, afterwards we get the Ice Spears in and quickly evaporate this guy with this amazing ability. It only takes like 3 Ice Spears to stance break this thing, as you see, after which we can get an extremely hard hitting critical hit in, and then the final bit is just absolutely juicy. You go nuts again with your claws and get rid of this boss too. Here again you see how extremely well the different components of the build flow together. The Fingering Thingy-Matinga is another remembrance boss in the game and can be destroyed using the same combo yet again. Blink Bolt onto it, then start throwing out those Ice Spears to get its stance broken very fast and get the Frostbite debuff. You see the damage starts raking up yet again, but also how fast we yet again stance break another DLC remembrance boss like it's nothing. And then the Fingering Fingers falls down and we don't have to immediately go for the critical hit. No, we use Scatter Shot Throw into this time frame onto his heart, which is his weak point, giving us extra damage, and we get another damage boost from him being stance broken. And after that we use the critical hit animation, getting it from behind its reposed indicator, teleporting you in front of it for maximum DPS into a beautiful crit right here again. Yes, you can in fact reach the guy's critical hit point from his weak point, his heart. Then we can finish him off with more scatter shot throws from our Claws of Night while he's recovering and get the blood loss proc quickly too. And then when the fingering guy decides to escape and goes on his ET journey up in the sky, we say no, you can't go. We shotgun him down and get another W. Okay, so you get the gist by now, right? The full combo is Blink Bolt into Ice Spears to get the Frostbite debuff going and the burst, and the Stance Break into the Claws of Night, Scattershot throws and its moveset for the blood loss proc and just insane DPS. Visualize the sequence of operation looks like this for the Nightshade, and in my opinion you want to use the Raptor Talons in your left hand or offhand while using the Claws of Night and Swift Spear in your right hand, the main hand. Reason being is that we then can chain our gap closer quickly into either of our main damage dealing weapons. Let me just show you how ridiculous this build truly gets against Midra, the Lord of Frenzy, another remembrance boss. In his original state we can immediately Blink Bolt to him, deal damage, and then Blink Bolt away to dodge his grab, and this truly shows how useful Blink Bolt can be. We then chain the Blink Bolt with both of our damaging abilities to get quickly rid of this weirdo. In the actual fight then, we immediately just start pumping out those Ice Spears to fundamentally break down Midra to its core. We basically ignore all of his flames, and while we're chain casting our Ice Spears, it results into first of all the Frostbite proc and then the Stance Break. Then we switch over to our Claws of Night right here. As you can see, we two-hand them to prepare there for the next part of the fight and get the dual wielding setup going and get the critical hit in right here, do great damage, hold a little party, do a dance or two, and while Midra is getting shredded and accordingly starts to recover, we bombard him with the ultimate claw attack, dealing a lot of damage in quick succession, and in the final bit of the fight we deal so much damage within seconds with all the juicy modifiers kicking in and the damage rising to up to like 20k for just one sequence. It is glorious. Midra is down. Now with that, we have defeated all the DLC Remembrance bosses except for Radahn. If you're wondering why Bale the Dread is not in this sequence, well, we beat him earlier on in the video at the timestamp shown on screen, if you remember. So you can check that fight out again, since I put it in the first part of the video instead of clustering it here with all the other bosses. Cool story, right? Who asked? But that fight was also completely trivialized as a Nightshade, and now we just have to take care of Radahn. See, with Radahn, we're kinda lucky, because he comes to us all the time, so we don't really have to use Blink Bolt to get to him. Instead, we just sip an Iron Jar Aromatic to give us insane poise, at the expense of us losing all our mobility and becoming a slowpoke essentially. But it doesn't matter, since Radahn just stalks us, so we just go ham with the Claws moveset and get a lot of damage this way in again seconds, without having to really worry about his 8 million attacks. And in phase 2, we replenish our HP as well as our Iron Jar Aromatic and do the same thing here yet again. Here you can see why Claws are very good versus Radahn, especially when combined with a little potion, because he stays right in front of you all the fight basically, giving you all the time to just attack him with your claws and go nuts and really shred him to pieces. This way you'll have the easiest Radahn kill of your life. But of course you can also go fancy in this fight, like versus Midra or Romina or the other fights, but in this fight, if you just want the easiest way to go about it, well, this is it. And with that you will have become the Elden DLC Lord yet again, and of course with how powerful this build is in the DLC zone, it's going to completely annihilate the base game too. And with that, the knowledge you seek about the Nightshade, a very powerful bursty assassin, the strongest of his kind really, that takes care of his enemies in just mere seconds, has been obtained. You have seen how the Nightshade operates in many different scenarios and have seen how to master this powerful character to completely and utterly destroy Elden Ring. Thank you for watching. However, if you want a completely different type of playstyle, then check out my Grizzly Bear Warrior right now too. This guy fights a lot slower than a Nightshade, but he uses a very big weapon that only those with insane strength can wield and let alone fight with. Shout out to War Thunder again for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to check out War Thunder now for free on PC, PlayStation or Xbox, and use my link in the pinned comment or video description to register. Those of you who are new or haven't played for 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms, including multiple premium vehicles, in-game currency and more.